Hello out there in internet land, and welcome to episode 4 of Cooking with Crick. Today we are making broccoli and cheddar soup, and our topic of discussion is the stories we tell. Nope, I don't want to hear it. Got a dog whining for food. So I'm going to go over ingredients as always, and then we'll get started. I have prepped some things a little more than I would, or have rather, for other dishes because the prep as well as the cooking would just take too long. So I have already shredded carrots. Well, I'll go over that. I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, welcome to episode 4, and here we are. So, again, going over ingredients. We have half a pound of broccoli. We have 2 or 3, I listed 2, which is fine, shredded carrots. And honestly, you can go with a bag of shredded carrots. You don't have to grate them on your own. Totally up to you. And also, obviously, anything fresh is going to be better just because, well, fresh is better, right? But if you only have like frozen broccoli or something like that, I'd recommend taking it out and letting it thaw before you actually use it. But not a bad option if you need. We have half an onion, we have 1 clove of garlic, half a stick of butter, a 1/4 cup of flour, and then 12 ounces of shredded cheddar cheese. Also salt and pepper, and we have our milk, but obviously I left that in the fridge until we need it. I have also, as a little bonus, picked up, and I didn't mention this, so don't feel bad if you don't have it, but I picked up some French bread to have with the soup. So, we're going to get started with just the last bit of prep, the garlic, and just chopping up the onion. And I have my compost bag over there. So, for those of you that are on, feel free to say hello. And as always, likes and shares are always appreciated. Likes, loves, comments, all the good stuff. And as always, if you are cooking, please feel free to share your results. Post a picture. Show me how it came out for you. So, this is actually probably one of my favorite soups. And I did a little research on where this might have come from, and honestly, the only thing it can be traced back to is it has its origins in French cooking, but cheese soup in general is actually really old. There was cheese soup back in ancient Greece, actually, and it evolved over time, of course, as things do. And it just got to a place where however many countries this moved through, broccoli just became a favorite ingredient to add to this soup. So there you go. And obviously the cheeses were different back then and things like that. But still. Oh, you know, and I did say that I was going to pop on some music this time, didn't I? Didn't I? So, oh, never mind. Bad prepping, Christopher. I just realized I left the speaker up in my daughter's room, and I don't want to leave you for that long while I would go get something like that. So, we're just going to improv and leave it as is because it's been fine so far. Okay, just finishing up the onion. And then we'll get to the pots and pans. I am preparing this in a large pot, but just so you can see the ingredients and I don't have to angle the camera really high to get into the pot. I'm actually going to start by prepping stuff in a pan, or starting to cook the stuff in a pan, and then I'll transfer it to the pot as we get going with the rest of the ingredients. So, by the way, I hope everyone is doing fabulous on this lovely day. Reach out, say hello, let me know what's going on. And, oh, as I mentioned in the previous posts announcing this episode, feel free to change this recipe to suit your purposes. So, I actually, in finding recipes like this, I tweak whatever I need for my tastes, but also for how much I'm making. And the recipe that I found that I'm using a version of was actually double this, so I already put this in half. So if you want to cut it in half again, if it's just you or one other person, then that's totally fine. So, all right, let us get started. So we have our onion, and we're going to start with that. Then we're going to add our carrots and our garlic. Thanks, that's the word. Then our salt and pepper, and then we use our flour to make a bit of a roux. Then we pour in our chicken broth, and then our broccoli, and let that stew a little bit. Then we pour in our milk and our cheese last. So that's going to be the order of things. All right. So let's come over here. I have my pan and pot prepped. And see what I mean? I didn't want to have to worry about hanging something over here so you could see inside, but this is obviously going to be better for the finished product. So we are going to do a nice drizzle. Turn our heat on. Going to do a nice drizzle of oil. Let that heat up. And we have our half a stick of butter. Bloop. Oh. One stood up on his head. Look at that. So we just get this nice and hot, and then we're going to pop our onions in here and get those going. And because, as I said, I wanted to get all of that stuff a little more prepped, because I don't want this to be an hour and a half episode. So I started with a few things prepped, but because it also takes a little longer to cook, we're going to have to let these onions cook down, and then things simmer for a little while as we get things going. So I'm going to start peppering in some conversation about the stories we tell as we're going here, as opposed to how I've done it before. So I'll start there. So, onions in. And that noise in the background is my daughter on the monitor, because she's upstairs. And I'm double dutying it today, but that's all right. Okay. So, we're going to let our onions cook for a little bit. And while we do, I wanted to address this idea of storytelling. And foundationally, because storytelling is life. It's what we do. If you ask, someone asks you, how was your day? You tell them a story about how your day was. Someone, needs to relay to you not just how something is, but how it started, how they feel about it, all of those things. It's a story. We love movies, we love books, we love stories around the campfire. It is just a psychologically foundational thing for human beings to storytell. And a lot of that is a really, really good thing. It's how we pass down history and lessons and morals, all of that good stuff. The problem is we often tell ourselves a lot of stories that aren't true, and then we live our life by those stories. And it can really become a problem if you've created certain negative or unserving stories for a long period of time, and then you're just living in that fantasy of those stories that actually aren't true. And it's really interesting how we actually love the comfort, going back to comfortable discomfort from previous episode. We have this need to hold on to our stories, whether they're serving us or not. And it's that fear of change, that fear of letting go, that fear of the unknown, right? So I wanted to touch on the idea of storytelling from a mental place. Not so much the stories that we outwardly speak to other people, but the ones that we tell ourselves in our head, and in so doing, either talk ourselves in or out of certain things that may or may not be good for us. And our ability to catch ourselves and address those stories can be the difference between an enjoyable life and a not so enjoyable life. So I'm going to pause there, and we are going to add our garlic. And mixed around a little bit. Oh yeah. And our carrots. And I personally, my weapon of choice is the silicone spatula. I find it very versatile in multiple different cooking dishes. And I actually use this even over a spatula a lot of the time. It's just that much more of a challenge when you have to flip things because it just slides off. But that's why I have spatulas too. So we're going to let that cook a little bit longer. While we do that, we're going to add some salt and pepper. So I'm a fan of adding this to taste. Obviously, you're not going to taste something boiling hot in the pan, but over time, we can add more as we go through the other steps. And then at the very end, obviously, if it's feeling like it needs a bit more of something, we can just add it right before we serve. So I kind of like it musical too. You hear that? Yep. That's how I do it. That is how I do it. Okay, this is looking pretty good. And we're getting to that space of things are browning a little bit and they're losing a lot more water. So we're getting that kind of caramelization going. So we are just about ready for our flour to make the roux. So I have mine pre-measured here. So part of the stories that I wanted to get into as soon as we get this going over here is we use certain mechanisms when we tell each other stories, and especially when we tell ourselves stories, to allow us, again going back to comfortable discomfort, to allow us these familiar, seemingly enjoyable things, but they're not serving us. Right? We have ways of keeping ourselves in that place in order to benefit from the negativity, right? Most of us would rather be right than feel good. There's just this need, the ego's need to dominate, to have power over, all of that type of stuff. So now we're gonna spread our flour around, and we basically want to leave this in for at least a minute, because for those of you who watched last week when Aisha was talking about eating cookie dough and all of that, like licking the spatula after you make cake, how so many people think that, oh, it's the raw egg, or whatever other ingredient it might be, that, oh, you shouldn't eat this because it'll get you sick. And it's actually the flour, because raw flour can make you sick. It's really interesting. So anytime you do any kind of roux, you always want to make sure the flour is cooked at least a little bit, and then that takes that issue out. And to be totally honest, I actually forget what the actual, how many times did I say actually? I actually forget what the issue is with flour specifically. Why it is that way, I just know that it is. So we are going to turn this down now to, I'm going to turn this to low. And that's something else. You really want to watch your temperatures, because everyone's stove is a little different. So I actually cook on medium, but you may have to cook on high to get this stuff boiling. So keep that in mind as you're preparing this stuff. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. And I do want to add, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to add my broth to the pan, and then kind of last steps with the broccoli and the cheese and the milk, I'll then add it to the pot. That sounds like a good plan. So we occasionally make our own chicken broth. We'll buy a chicken and then, debone it and save the carcass and then make a broth, which is nice. But sometimes you just need to go with the store-bought stuff. So we're going to go with 2 cups. And by the way, see how this is pouring? Right? Because the air is not getting in. I'll show you a little secret with these containers. Because everyone assumes, well, the spout's at the bottom, right? So that's how I pour it. But if you look, right, it's always going to have that issue with the airflow. But if you flip it around and pour from this way, where the spout's on top, watch. No issue. And there's 2 cups. All right, now we basically want to take our time with this bring it back up to temperature, and let everything blend. And for those of you who don't know, the basic need for a roux, which is basically just you're adding flour to a little bit of moisture, whether that's butter or oil, or even just the moisture from the whatever you're cooking. And the flour will help to thicken it as you add other ingredients over time. So it's kind of a hardiness and a thickness that you get from creating a roux. So most stews and things like that will have you add flour, and that's why. All right. So as I said, I'm going to turn this up just a little bit to get it rolling again. We basically just want things to be up to temperature, and then we can start adding a couple other ingredients. And once we get the broccoli in here, that's really the biggest step, because we have to let the broccoli absorb the moisture and then soften. So that's really the longest step, I think, in this whole process. But in general, as you work through these ingredients, it's more about just letting the flavors combine before you add another ingredient, and you get this nice evolution of soupage, if that's a word. So it's actually looking pretty good. It's starting to thicken. Just see, not quite as liquidy as it was before, so it's starting to thicken up from that roux, which is great. See, and even that, pretty tasty with just carrots, onions, garlic, and a little bit of chicken broth. Okay, so that's up to temperature now, and I want to add my broccoli. So I'm going to grab that. What I do want to do, I'm going to come back over here real quick, and I'm just, gotta drain that. Just going to chop this up, and this is a rough chop. You don't need it looking especially nice. You just want to have, again, this is, I like stuff in my soup. I like chunks of things. I'm not a fan of, even like a, what do you even call it? Like a chicken fajita soup or a chicken tortilla soup. That's what it is. Where sometimes it's totally blended. Not to say that I don't like a blended soup every now and then, but I appreciate the heartiness. It's just like ice cream. I actually I'm less of a fan of just a single flavor of ice cream than I am of nuts and, chocolate pieces and swirls of things. Not to say that there isn't something to be enjoyed about simplicity every now and then. Just having a single flavor is a good thing. But I like that kind of combination of things and good variety. So, all right. So, like I said, just a rough chop. You don't have to go crazy. And we are going to take this over. How can I do this? Stab myself while I'm moving the phone. All right. So, back over here, and we are going to add our broccoli. Okay. mix this in. Oh yeah, and already that's looking nice and thick. So we're in good shape. And in fact, I'm realizing now I might have enough room in this pan to just do the whole thing in this pan. That was my concern. It wasn't really about it was less about visual and more about space. But I might actually have enough space in this pan, so we'll see how it goes. So now we can have the whole thing here and we don't have to worry about it. So for now, I am going to turn this back up a little bit and I'm going to let this cook down. And after the broccoli softens a little bit, then we're going to add our milk. And as I said before, if you want it thicker, you can add half and half, or obviously 1 cup of milk, 1 cup of heavy cream, hence half and half anyway. Whatever you have available. I personally like it because the roux makes it fairly thick already, and then just adding the cream and having it cook down, or excuse me, the milk, that's thick enough for me, so I've enjoyed it, and I don't have to go out and buy an extra thing of heavy cream if I'm not using it on the regular. So yeah, I think we're good. We're gonna leave it in this pan. I'll break out the milk, and it's just the milk and cheese that's left. So get that all prepped. All right, we are up to temperature, so I turn this back down to a simmer, and we're just going to let this cook for a little bit while we chat. So, okay. The other big thing with talking to yourself, telling yourself stories. I specifically wanted to write this down because I think it's true of all of us. We have this need to embellish just a little bit, you know. Sometimes that's on purpose, and sometimes it's over time, right? So we embellish the positive stories we tell other people. We add a tweak that makes it a little bit better. Or we've told it so many times, we don't even realize what we've added. Or, you know, again, like a game of telephone, we hear it from someone who heard it from somebody else, and we put our own little spin on it, sometimes not even on purpose. And then it evolves and it changes. So we have these little embellishments that we tell in our stories for our ego, because if the story's a little better, we might get a few more laughs. We might get an extra pat on the back. We might get, well, especially if you're doing it for performance, you get a bigger laugh if you're a stand-up comic. You get more sales if you're a marketer. Storytelling, when done very well, is amazingly beneficial for the ego, but also for messaging and getting your ideas out there. And that's a great thing. It's a positive tool. The problem is, if we repeat a story in our heads long enough, we tend to start to believe it, whether it's true or not. And we then embellish on the negative side of things, those stories as well. And that's where things like hyperbole come in, right? Everything sucks forever and always. It's never going to get better. This sucks. I hate it. We don't really mean that. I have not met a single person who, when they came out of that funk that they were in, ever actually meant that. No, I was just pissed off. Yeah, and understandably so. But it's still very disserving and non-beneficial to consistently do that to yourself, because you skew that way the more you do it, right? So the embellishments of, well, I had a bad day, and, you know, this person cut me off, and it wasn't really a big deal, but it really pissed me off, and they made the light and I didn't, so Now I'm just going to harp on it for a while, and I'm going to make it sound a little worse than it is, because that way I might get more sympathy, and I can get the added ego bonus of proving that my day was worse than someone else's. Yeah, that feels good, because at least that's something I can gain from this negative experience. Yeah, my bad is worse than your bad. Yeah, oh yeah, that feels so good to be right, to be in a better bad place than you. And it's laughable when you actually talk it out. And that's the interesting thing. And I just kind of naturally arrived there, so I'm going to jump ahead to it. My tool that I want to give you for this process is say it out loud. If you're telling yourself a story, and there's always a part of you that knows it's not true, but you're in it, you're in that zone, I just have to, right? Fine. Follow that path, follow that wave, go through your process. You're feeling it for a reason. There's nothing wrong with going through an emotion. The problem is when you hang on to it and you harp it and you just keep going and going and going, and that doesn't serve you at all. So go through the process, but then whatever you're saying to yourself in your head, even if it's not sentences, just this feeling, oh, I'm a piece of shit, and I'm never going to get anywhere, and I'm not good enough, and all that stuff. Start saying it out loud, even if no one else is around, and especially if someone else is around. You might want to warn them first that that's what you're doing. But just start. I'm a piece of shit. I'm not worthy. I never make enough money. My life sucks forever and always. I'm a horrible, horrible, horrible person. And I just did that thing and it proved the fact that I am a horrible person. Yep. And the longer you talk out loud of those things that are spinning around in your head, the more ridiculous it sounds, because you know it's not true. Do you ever have that experience where you have this really cool idea and you start to tell someone about it, and then halfway through you're like, this is the stupidest idea I've ever had in my life, and I didn't even realize it until I started talking? Same thing. It's the same thing. You have to get it out of your head, because it's almost like a dream, right? Dreams seem so normal and real when you're in them. It's like, this makes sense. That's my cousin Matt, even though he looks like a lion with an ass head. And, Kenny G is his doppelganger. You're like, what does that even mean? It's like, I don't know. It made sense in my dream. And then you wake up and you're like, that was ludicrous. So, all right. We're going to come back here. And we are nice and simmered. And we're going to add our milk. So we go 2 cups. One. 2. And there she blows. So again, we just want to get this back up to temperature. And this being basically the last step, we're probably going to add some more salt and pepper, because I'm going to taste this here in a minute after this blends. But the last step is going to be adding the cheese. And you don't want the soup boiling when you add the cheese, because it can kind of clump together and it doesn't spread out evenly. You basically just want everything hot enough that the natural heat, without the additional heat from the burner, just melts the cheese a little slower, and then it blends much better that way. So that's my little tip for this section. But now that we have this mixed, I'm just going to do a little taste. Oh yeah. And yes, it does need some more salt and pepper. So, did you hear it? Did you hear the music? Okay, so we're going to get this incorporated, and we're going to let it come up to temperature. We're going to chat a little bit more, and then we'll add our cheese. And after that, it's time to taste. You know, it's funny, I had somebody, I did that whistle. Someone I was standing near once was like, "Oh my God, how are you doing that?" It's like, "What, whistling?" Like, no, how do you make it waver like that? Like I just use my tongue behind the purse of my lips. "Oh my God, that's amazing." It's like, aren't you like 35? How did you never hear that in your life before? It's a fun little tidbit. Okay. I'm going to bring this back up to temperature. And I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm just not going to leave it on low. So we'll check back in with that in a minute. So basically to move on in that topic and that tool, that idea of getting it out of your head. Because as I said before, it's like a dream. It makes sense in your head. Then when you get it out, like, okay, maybe that's not really serving me all that much. So the problem is being able to catch yourself when you're doing it. And just like anything else, it takes practice. But especially when you're alone and you're just having a shit time and you start saying those things, you repeat those stories. I've done this, and it's saying it out loud, especially, you're, brushing your teeth or whatever, and you can see yourself in the mirror. Just say it out loud to yourself, looking at yourself in the eyes, and you catch yourself doing stuff like, dude, shut up. You know that's not true. Don't say that. It's not going to make anything better. It's just a habit. It's a friggin', little bit of programming that you haven't got around yet. Stop it. So it's kind of this check and balance. And it's a similar mechanism with a lot of other stuff. If you can't sleep, one of the best things you can do is grab a notepad and a pen and just start writing. Just do free writing to get whatever you think. It doesn't matter. Just write. And then suddenly you can fall asleep a little better because things aren't rolling around in your head endlessly. You got them out into the world. So I love that mechanism of getting things out. It's almost like, if you're looking in a dark closet, you can't see anything, but you feel around and you feel something. You're like, okay, I know something's there, but I can't really make it out. But you take it out into the light and you're like, oh, okay, that's what it was. I couldn't really tell just from touch alone. It's that aspect of it too. Being able to kind of pull this story out of the darkness, this cozy darkness of negativity, and just get it out, to be able to look at it and say, that's not what I thought it was, or that's not beneficial, or that's not true, whatever it is. And it, over time and with practice, it really allows you to catch these things and slowly start to change them. And obviously it doesn't fix everything on a dime. But good God, man. The difference now with how I spin out with stories, because we all do it on occasion, compared to how I used to, is just kind of amazing. So, the stories we tell. It's interesting too how we tend to skew negative when we're thinking of ourselves and how other people have it better and it's easier for them. And, especially if they have more material things than us or more money than us. Oh, if only I had it that easy, or I had it that good, or whatever. Another little interesting awareness that I've had in recent months is the grass is always greener when it's positive. You never hear anyone say, wow, that guy's having a shit day. I wish I could step into his shoes. Or, wow, look at her. She had the worst financial month in her job ever. She's stressed out and she's feeling horrible. Oh, wow, would I like to be her. So, and that's the thing. The grass is never always greener with the same person. You're just jumping from person to person to find the greener grass. Oh, well, they're having a positive day. I'd rather be them. Oh, well, they're having a shit day now. I guess it's someone else. Oh, yeah, they're having a positive day. I'd rather be them. You know, all part of the stories. All part of the stories. Okay. Well, this is looking pretty good right now. I think we're going to let it simmer for another couple minutes. Then we're going to add the cheese. And we will turn it down so the cheese doesn't go crazy with how it's melted. So, Mama is now in with baby girl, so we're gonna shut off the monitor, so we're all set. So yeah, I guess the foundation of everything I'm talking about with the stories that we tell, and basically what I kind of a summary of what I wanted to get across. There's this ego desire to be the best, to get the most, to have it all. And the interesting part is it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad, positive, negative, beneficial, non-beneficial, just as long as we have it. And that's the difference between our natural instinct that tells us, hey, that's really hot, you probably shouldn't touch it. We don't have to listen to that part of ourselves. But it's probably good if we do, because there's a lot of benefit that can come from that. And it's the same thing with storytelling. It's almost like the habitual autopilot versus the conscious engagement, right? So we're all going to just continually perpetuate what our programming is, because as soon as consciously we stop paying attention, the program takes over, right? So if we're not careful, we just mindlessly tell ourselves these stories, and then our life doesn't change, or it gets worse, or it's like, oh, here it is again. I guess I'm just a big old piece of crap, and I'm never going to get better, and all of that stuff. And it's like, you stopped on the side of the road, and you're sitting there for an hour, and you're just pissed off that you're not home yet. It's like, what the hell? Why? Why am I not home? I don't understand. I'm in my car. The engine's running. Why aren't I going anywhere? You have to take that conscious positive action, and slowly over time, things will change for you. But it's amazing how we get in these places of, this isn't going to work, or this hasn't worked, so I'm just a horrible human being. Because it's easier than trying again, is just convincing ourselves that we're not good enough to get the work done. And as an added bonus, we don't have to do the work then. How about that, right? So, catch yourself when you're telling yourself these horrible stories. And say them out loud. Say them out loud until they sound ridiculous. And it will help. So, okay. We're going to add our cheese. Heat off. And ready for this. So, I like to add a little, stir it in, and then add a little more. Just so you're not have this huge heap of cheese. Plus it blends better that way. And now you're going to want to let this sit for a little while too, just so the cheese can completely melt, because it will take a little bit. But obviously the cheese is going to help to thicken this up a little too, which is another reason I just use milk instead of the cream that a lot of recipes call for. But that is your prerogative. So, a little more. Yeah, looks like we're going to have about 3 rounds before this is done. So, who among you has never had this soup? Because I know it is a favorite, and going back to the kind of the history of it that I started with in the beginning, there's actually this is one of the most popular soups in the country. It's just kind of been, as I said, it traced back to French cooking, but it has been adopted big time by the United States, and is just this kind of go-to soup. Pretty much any soup place you go to will have a version of this, which is so funny. Comfort food, right? Yes, that's it. Okay, and our last volley of cheese. And there we are. So, a little different today. Obviously, had to talk a bit while we were cooking. So, I hope that seemed all right for everyone and wasn't too all over the place. I'm still figuring this out and growing these episodes and topics, and really, my goal with all of this is I've been doing a lot of cooking during the pandemic. I've always enjoyed cooking, but so much more since the pandemic started. And in doing my coaching work and building my programs and talking to clients and just being able to share information that's beneficial. And I thought, why not combine the two? Get some enjoyment, some insights, some education, some points of view, perspective, and then enjoy a good meal. So, let me try this. Oh, man. All right. See? And now a final seasoning. There. Does that help? Yay, it helps. Hear the music. Hear the music. All right. Our last little stir. And then we're going to plate this thing. Well, bowl this thing, but you know. Oh yeah, this is looking really good. Really, really good. Depending on how much you make, it will last in the fridge, but I wouldn't take it more than a few days or a week at most. Honestly, I've never frozen this type of soup, so I don't know how well it would freeze. So I would caution you to make a small enough batch that you'll get through it in 1 or 2 days, or that you're going to eat in one sitting. So it's not that hard, just takes a little time. And obviously our episode got a little long today because our dish was a little longer to prepare. But now that we have this whole thing going, I'm going to take my spoon. Here we go. Oh yeah. Yeah, see, and how thick it already is, even without the cream. So that's why I just use milk. So heat's off. this over here now, and there we are, folks. Our broccoli cheddar soup. And my spoon. And there it is. Wow, that came out really nice. And there you have it, folks. Broccoli and cheddar soup. So I am going to sit here and enjoy this soup. Probably bring some to my wife. But closing out, remembering that your stories are not you, but you can use them to your advantage. And we all do it, so don't get down on yourself about it. But catch yourself whenever possible. You're spinning out, you're saying something negative, you're jumping into hyperbole. Start saying it out loud. Even if you're walking down the street, people may look at you funny, but seriously, just wherever you can, start saying those things out loud, and you will realize how ridiculous they sound. And you'll be able to stop yourself that much easier, that much sooner, and get back to moving toward what will benefit you and what will help you grow and evolve and become a better person. So, thank you for joining me for episode 4 of Cooking with Crick. And next week, I will actually tell you the story of where the word crick came from. It's a fun little family story. And I will be in touch about what we'll be cooking and what our topic is. So, until then, enjoy your food. I hope the soup came out great. Post your pictures. Send me comments and likes. Much appreciated. And I will see you all next week for episode 5. Have a good one.